What if an entire society decided to disappear from history, not erased, but choosing isolation? Dozens of uncontacted groups live in the Amazon today. Stay with me. We'll discover who they are, how they protect themselves, and why contact is not always the answer. These are not lost people, and they are not relics of the past. They are thriving societies that have chosen to remain separate, preserving languages, traditions, and survival skills that go back thousands of years. In this video, we'll explore how uncontacted tribes of the Amazon live, what dangers they face, and why protecting their choice of isolation matters for all of humanity. Stay with me, because every chapter reveals something more surprising than the last. Chapter 1: Into the Green Abyss. The Amazon rainforest is one of the most mysterious and powerful places on Earth. Stretching across 9 countries in South America, it covers more than 2 million square miles, larger than the entire continental United States. It is often called the lungs of our planet because it produces about 20% of the world's oxygen. But beyond its size and beauty, the Amazon hides secrets that challenge everything we think we know about human civilization. Here, beneath the endless green canopy, are countless rivers winding like silver veins through the jungle. Some rivers are so wide they look like oceans. Others so narrow they vanish beneath the trees. Towering above them are giant trees, older than our cities, creating a natural fortress that outsiders rarely penetrate. For anyone who dares to enter, the rainforest can feel overwhelming, alive with sound, danger, and mystery. And yet, in the very heart of this wild and untamed world, people live. Entire communities that remain completely uncontacted by modern society. Imagine that, while most of us scroll on phones, drive cars, and live in bustling cities, there are men, women, and children who wake up every day to a world without electricity, without internet, and without any connection to what we call modern life. These tribes are not relics of the past. They are not frozen in time. They are living, breathing societies that have chosen to remain separate. For them, the forest is not a prison, but freedom. It gives them food, medicine, water, shelter, and everything they need to survive. Their traditions, stories, and ways of life are passed down from one generation to the next, far away from the noise of the outside world. Scientists estimate that there may be more than 100 uncontacted tribes across the Amazon. Some have never exchanged a single word with outsiders. Others may have once seen or encountered strangers, but retreated back into the forest to protect themselves. To us, they are invisible, but to them, the outside world is not just unfamiliar, it can be dangerous. The mystery of their existence raises so many questions. How did they find food in such a dense and sometimes unforgiving forest? How do they build homes, raise families, and keep their cultures alive without ever touching the modern world? And perhaps the most puzzling question of all, if no one talks to them, how do we even know they are really there? The answers don't come from face-to-face meetings. They come from faint traces, broken branches, footprints in the mud, and smoke rising gently through the trees. Clues that whisper, "We are here." Chapter 2: Traces in the Trees. Imagine standing on the edge of a rainforest so vast it feels endless. The canopy above blocks out the sun, and every step you take is swallowed by layers of vegetation. For outsiders, the Amazon can feel like a green ocean with no map, no direction. And yet, within this maze, hidden communities move with ease, leaving behind only the faintest of clues. So how do we even know uncontacted tribes are out there, living in silence and secrecy? The answer lies in the traces they leave, subtle signs that speak louder than words. One of the most important tools for researchers has been the eye in the sky, satellites. High above the Earth, satellites capture images that reveal more than we can see on the ground. Sometimes, among the endless green clearings appear patches of forest that have been deliberately cut down. These aren't random gaps caused by storms or fires. They are geometric, organized, evidence of small villages hidden deep within the jungle. You can even see tiny huts shaped like circles or ovals arranged in patterns. Each clearing is like a footprint, proof that an invisible society is thriving below. Then there are aerial surveys. Small planes flying low over the forest have, on rare occasions, captured photographs of tribes. In one famous image taken from above, members of an uncontacted group in Brazil painted their bodies red with uricum dye and pointed arrows at the sky, a clear warning to the plane overhead: stay away. That single photograph traveled the world, shocking millions who never imagined that people could still live in complete isolation in the 21st century. But for the tribe, it wasn't curiosity, it was defense. Beyond satellites and photographs, there are the quieter signs. Hunters and explorers sometimes stumble upon footprints along muddy riverbanks. Simple tools left behind near fishing spots. Gardens carved into the forest, where crops like manioc, bananas, or maize grow in carefully maintained patches. Smoke rising in the distance, hinting at cooking fires from hidden homes. These are whispers in the jungle, signs that we are not alone. And the signs don't stop at the physical. Occasionally, outsiders have heard the echo of distant voices carried by the wind. Songs, chants, or the faint beating of drums. These moments are rare and fleeting, but they remind us that entire worlds exist just beyond the curtain of trees. What makes these discoveries even more fascinating is the way tribes protect themselves from being found. Many practice what's called avoidance behavior. If they hear motorboats or planes, they retreat deeper into the forest. Some camouflage their homes or move their villages entirely when they sense danger nearby. They know the forest intimately, every river, every trail, every sound. To outsiders, the jungle feels impenetrable. To them, it is both shield and sanctuary. But sometimes, encounters are impossible to avoid. Illegal loggers, miners, or ranchers have reported brief sightings of uncontacted people. In some cases, arrows were fired to scare intruders away. These warnings are not aggression for the sake of violence. They are survival tactics. History has taught these tribes that outsiders bring disease, danger, and disruption. Every arrow shot into the air is a desperate message. Leave us in peace. Perhaps the most haunting evidence of their presence comes from abandoned villages. When scientists or officials enter a site after tribes have moved on, they often find simple yet ingenious homes made of palm leaves, wooden frames, and vines. tools carved from stone and bone, baskets woven with remarkable skill. These objects tell us that these communities are not primitive, as many wrongly assume, but deeply resourceful and adapted to their environment in ways modern society can barely comprehend. And then there are the stories, local accounts passed down by neighboring tribes who have occasional contact with the outside world. Some say they've glimpsed people deeper in the forest, carrying bows or blowguns. Others share knowledge of their languages passed down from distant ancestors. In this way, the existence of uncontacted tribes isn't just proven by satellites or photographs. It's kept alive in the oral histories of the Amazon itself. Together, these signs create a puzzle. We may not know the names of these people or the full details of their culture, but we know they are there, and that knowledge alone is powerful. It forces us to rethink what it means to be human, to survive, and to choose a different path in a world that feels increasingly interconnected. But here's the real question. Surviving without the modern world is one thing. How do these communities actually thrive, raise families, and build entire societies inside a jungle that outsiders often find impossible to navigate? The answer reveals just how much wisdom and resilience it takes to live in harmony with the Amazon. These tribes are not struggling to survive. They are masters of survival. Chapter 3. Masters of survival to most of us. The Amazon seems like a dangerous wilderness, filled with venomous snakes, jaguars, and diseases that thrive in the humid air. Survival here feels nearly impossible without technology, medicine, or modern shelter. But for uncontacted tribes, the Amazon is not an enemy. It is a partner. They are not struggling to get by. They are thriving in ways perfectly adapted to this environment. Let's begin with food. Hunting and fishing are the cornerstones of survival. Many uncontacted tribes use longbows crafted from local hardwoods, strung with fibers from vines. Their arrows are often tipped with sharpened bone, stone, or hardened wood. Skilled hunters can bring down monkeys, tapirs, or wild pigs. For smaller prey, blowguns are used, delicate weapons that fire darts coated with natural poisons, often derived from plants like curare. One well-aimed dart can silently take down a bird perched high in the canopy. Rivers provide another vital source of food. Tribes fashion fish traps from woven reeds or vines, placing them strategically in streams. Sometimes they even use plant-based poisons, crushed roots that release chemicals into the water, temporarily stunning fish and making them easy to catch by hand. To outsiders, these methods might seem primitive. In reality, they are highly sophisticated, developed over centuries of observing the river's flow, the fish's behavior, and the seasons of the forest. Then there's farming. Contrary to the idea that these groups live only by hunting and gathering, many practice shifting agriculture. They clear small patches of forest, carefully chosen, never too large, and grow crops like manioc, maize, bananas, and sweet potatoes. Manioc, also known as cassava, is especially important. It's a root vegetable that, when processed correctly, provides a reliable source of carbohydrates. The knowledge required to detoxify bitter manioc, which contains natural poisons, is passed down through generations. A reminder that what we call traditional knowledge is in fact a library of survival skills. And food is only part of the story. Shelter in the rainforest must protect against rain, heat, and insects. Tribes construct huts from palm leaves, branches, and vines. Some are temporary, designed for a hunting expedition. Others are large communal houses where entire families live together. These homes are often circular or oval, shaped to withstand storms and provide ventilation. They may not look like much to an outsider, but they are perfectly adapted to the environment. Cool during the day and dry during heavy rains. But perhaps the most astonishing survival skill lies in their knowledge of plants. Scientists believe the Amazon contains more than 80,000 plant species, many with medicinal properties. Uncontacted tribes have an intimate understanding of which roots cure fevers, which leaves heal wounds, and which bark eases pain. This knowledge has been refined over thousands of years through observation, trial, and careful teaching. To these communities, the forest is not a pharmacy waiting to be discovered. It already is their pharmacy. Consider this. Many modern medicines, from quinine to aspirin, have origins in indigenous plant knowledge. And yet, uncontacted tribes may hold even more secrets, cures, and treatments unknown to science, because they have chosen to keep their wisdom within their communities. In their isolation lies a treasure trove of knowledge about human health and survival. Social survival is just as important as physical survival. These tribes live in close-knit groups, often ranging from a few dozen to a few hundred people. Decisions are made collectively, roles are shared, and traditions are honored through stories, songs, and rituals. Every member has a place, from hunters and gatherers to healers and storytellers. Children grow up not only learning survival skills, but also understanding the cultural identity of their people. In this way, knowledge isn't just passed down, it is lived every single day. And let's not forget, the Amazon itself is a constant challenge. Heavy rains can flood entire areas. Predators lurk in the shadows. Insects spread disease. Yet the tribe's intimate knowledge of the land allows them to anticipate dangers and adapt quickly. They know which paths flood in the rainy season, where jaguars hunt at night, and which plants ward off biting insects. What feels like chaos to outsiders is a carefully mapped world to them. This raises a striking contrast. While modern societies rely on technology to survive, uncontacted tribes rely on memory, observation, and tradition. Their tools may not be made of steel, but they are crafted from the forest itself, renewable, sustainable, and perfectly suited to their needs. Their medicine may not come in bottles, but it has kept them alive for centuries. Their knowledge may not be written in books, but it is etched into every story, every lesson, every practice handed from one generation to the next. So when we talk about uncontacted tribes as primitive, we miss the truth. They are not primitive. They are masters of survival, experts in a way of life that allows them to thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. In fact, in many ways, they are more sustainable and self-sufficient than we are. But survival in the forest is not their only challenge. While they have mastered the threats of nature, there is one danger they cannot always defend against. A danger that comes not from the jungle, but from outside of it. And that danger is invisible, silent, and more deadly than any jaguar or snake. It's the arrival of disease, the kind of sickness the modern world shrugs off, but for them could mean the end of everything. Chapter 4. The silent enemies when we think of danger in the Amazon. Our minds usually go to the obvious. Jaguars stalking silently through the undergrowth, venomous snakes coiled in the shadows, or piranhas swirling in muddy rivers. But for uncontacted tribes, the deadliest threat is not the animals around them. It is something they cannot see, cannot fight, and cannot prepare for. That enemy is disease. For most of us, illnesses like the common cold, the flu, or even measles seem minor. A few days of rest, some medicine, and we move on with our lives. But for uncontacted tribes who have lived in isolation for generations, these sicknesses can be catastrophic. Their immune systems have never been exposed to such viruses. They have no natural resistance. What we consider harmless can sweep through an isolated community like wildfire. History gives us chilling examples. When Europeans first arrived in the Americas centuries ago, diseases like smallpox and influenza wiped out millions of indigenous people. Entire civilizations, from the Aztecs to the Inca, collapsed not because of battles or weapons, but because of germs. And the same tragic story has repeated itself on smaller scales in the Amazon. In the 20th century, when missionaries, explorers, and developers made contact with remote tribes, outbreaks of measles and influenza followed. In some cases, entire villages lost half their population in just a few weeks. Survivors often abandoned their homes and retreated deeper into the forest, traumatized and fearful of outsiders forever. These events are not ancient history. Some happened only decades ago. But disease is only one of the silent enemies. Another is the steady encroachment of outsiders. Illegal logging operations cut deeper into protected reserves, destroying not only the trees, but the food sources and shelters that tribes depend on. Miners searching for gold and oil pollute rivers with mercury and chemicals, poisoning fish and people alike. Cattle ranchers burn vast areas of forest to create pasture land, leaving behind scorched earth where once there was vibrant life. Each intrusion doesn't just damage the land, it increases the risk of unwanted contact. A logger crossing paths with an uncontacted group may spread disease without even realizing it. A miner carrying flu can wipe out a family with nothing more than a cough. For uncontacted tribes, the forest is their fortress. But modern industries are battering at the gates, and the dangers don't stop there. Along with loggers and miners come traffickers, poachers, and sometimes violent groups who see uncontacted people not as neighbors to respect, but as obstacles to remove. Stories exist of isolated tribes attacked, their villages burned, their members killed. Because they cannot call governments or seek justice, many of these tragedies remain hidden in the shadows. For tribes, even the faint hum of a motorboat or the roar of a plane overhead can be a warning sign that danger is near. Many groups have developed avoidance strategies, fleeing at the first sign of outsiders, hiding trails, or relocating villages overnight. Imagine the fear, knowing that a stranger's sneeze or a chainsaw in the distance could bring the end of your world. And yet, these silent enemies are relentless. The forest may provide protection, but modern hunger for land and resources reaches further every year. Deforestation rates in parts of the Amazon are rising, pushing uncontacted groups into smaller and smaller areas. Like islands in a shrinking sea, their safe zones are disappearing. This raises a painful dilemma for governments, scientists, and human rights groups should we try to help. Should we step in with medicine, vaccines, or technology to save them from disease and exploitation? On the surface, the answer seems obvious. Who wouldn't want to help protect vulnerable communities? But the reality is far more complicated. Contact, even when well-intentioned, has almost always brought disaster. Missionaries once believed they were saving souls, but in their footsteps came epidemics. Scientists hoped to study and learn, but their presence carried bacteria and viruses. Governments sometimes saw uncontacted tribes as barriers to development, and forced assimilation led to cultural destruction. And so, the silent enemies remain. Disease, deforestation, exploitation, all pressing in from the outside world. Uncontacted tribes are strong, resilient, and resourceful, but no skill with a bow and arrow. No knowledge of plants or rivers can protect them from germs they've never encountered or bulldozers carving through the forest. The tragedy is that their greatest strength, their isolation, is also their greatest vulnerability. It shields them from the noise of modern life, but it leaves them defenseless against the invisible dangers we carry without thought. So what should be done? Should outsiders intervene? Should we break their isolation to vaccinate, to provide medicine, to shield them from modern threats? Or would that very act of helping destroy the independence they have fought so hard to preserve? This question, to contact or not to contact, is one of the most difficult ethical dilemmas of our time. And it is at the heart of the next chapter, the question of contact. Chapter 5, Encroaching Frontiers, the Amazon Feels Endless. 5.5 million square kilometers of green stretching across 9 countries. But if you zoom in, you'll see the edges crumbling. For the uncontacted tribes who have survived here for thousands of years, the forest is more than just scenery. It is their armor, their medicine, their marketplace, their temple. Take away the forest, and you take away their existence. And yet, the forest is being eaten alive. It begins quietly, almost invisibly. A dirt road cut through the jungle by illegal loggers, carving scars into land that once felt untouchable. Then the sounds arrive. The metallic scream of chainsaws, the groan of ancient trees collapsing after centuries of life. For tribes who live by the rhythm of birds, insects, and flowing rivers, these new sounds are alien, terrifying, and permanent. But logging is only the first wave. Behind it come the miners. They search for gold, oil, and rare earth minerals buried deep beneath the soil. To get them, they blast apart riverbeds, poisoning water with mercury. For us, gold is luxury. For them, those rivers are lifelines. The fish they eat, the water they drink, the plants they depend on, all turn toxic. Imagine drinking from a stream you've trusted for generations, not knowing every sip carries poison. Then come the flames. Farmers and ranchers set fire to massive swaths of jungle to clear land for cattle or crops. At night, satellites in space capture glowing red scars across the Earth. These are not natural fires, they are deliberate burns. Entire ecosystems, home to jaguars, macaws, and countless unseen species, are reduced to ash. For tribes living nearby, the smoke carries not only the smell of destruction, but the message that their world is shrinking. To global markets, this is framed as progress beef for export. Soy for global trade, timber for furniture, oil for energy. But for the uncontacted tribes, it is invasion. They have no words for global economy. All they see is the forest, their shield. Their library of knowledge disappearing piece by piece. And then there is the deadliest enemy of all, disease. Outsiders may come with trucks and tools, but the most powerful weapon they carry is invisible. A simple flu, a cough, even the common cold can wipe out an entire village. In the 20th century, some tribes who first met missionaries or loggers lost more than half their people within only a few years. To them, a handshake can mean death. A breath too close can mean the end of centuries of tradition. This is why isolation is not fear. It is wisdom. It is resistance. History tells us the danger clearly. The Panara tribe in Brazil was nearly wiped out after road construction in the 1970s exposed them to outside illnesses. The Nahua of Peru suffered devastating deaths after oil exploration moved into their territory. These stories are not ancient history. They are warnings, repeating even now. And yet, modern technology has made tribes more visible than ever. Satellites map their clearings. Drones capture images of their homes. Aerial photographs once meant for research can become blueprints for exploitation. The very act of proving they exist puts them at risk. This is the great paradox of the Amazon's uncontacted tribes. The more we find them, the more fragile they become. Every bulldozer, every fire, every cough from an outsider is a reminder that their survival depends not on discovery, but on being left alone. The frontiers are not just encroaching. They are collapsing. And unless strong protections are enforced, these tribes may not disappear by choice, but by force. So the question is, can the modern world, addicted to exploration and expansion, truly honor the most radical demand of all, the right to remain unseen? Chapter 6. The question of contact. For as long as there have been outsiders venturing into the Amazon, there has been one haunting question. Should uncontacted tribes be left alone, or should we reach out to them? At first, the answer seemed obvious to the outside world. Missionaries, explorers, and governments saw contact as a duty. Some believed they were bringing salvation, religion, medicine, or education. Others saw opportunity, new labor, new land, and new resources. But for the tribes themselves, contact has almost always been less about salvation and more about tragedy. The historical record is filled with stories of disaster. In the Itotiling, the Panara people of Brazil were devastated when a highway carved through their territory. Road workers and settlers carried diseases that spread rapidly. In only a few years, their population collapsed, forcing survivors to abandon ancestral lands. In Peru, the Nahua tribe's first sustained contact came in the 1980s. when oil exploration reached their forests. Within months, more than half of their people had died from respiratory infections. Imagine that centuries of survival in the rainforest undone in a single season by illnesses carried unintentionally by outsiders. And these are just the stories we know. Many groups have no written history. Some may have vanished without the world ever realizing they existed. Each first contact is both a meeting and often an ending. So, should contact be avoided completely? Those in favor of outreach raise strong arguments. They say the forest is no longer a reliable shield. Deforestation, fires, and climate change are shrinking the Amazon at alarming rates. Illegal loggers and miners are pushing deeper each year. And the greatest threat of all, disease, may reach tribes anyway, even without direct contact, through contaminated rivers or nearby settlers. From this perspective, reaching out could be an act of protection, a chance to provide medicine, vaccines, and alliances that might help these groups survive in the modern world. But there is another side, one that speaks not from theory, but from the lived voices of the tribes themselves. For decades, uncontacted peoples have given their answer clearly. They do not want contact. Planes flying overhead are met with arrows. Outsiders approaching their camps are met with silence or retreat. Entire groups vanish deeper into the forest when spotted. Their actions are their language, and their message is unmistakable. Leave us alone. This is why many governments and organizations now defend what is called the no-contact policy. Brazil, Peru, and other nations with uncontacted groups officially recognize that these peoples have the right to remain in isolation. Instead of forcing integration, officials create buffer zones, lands legally protected from exploitation. On paper, these zones serve as shields, ensuring tribes can live as they choose in freedom and autonomy. But here is the dilemma. A law written on paper does not stop a chainsaw. In reality, illegal ranchers, miners, drug traffickers, and even loggers still cross into protected lands. Armed confrontations are not uncommon. Sometimes, tribes fight back. Other times, they retreat. Each incursion carries the risk of violence, displacement, or disease. So, the debate continues. Should outsiders intervene more directly to save these communities from threats they cannot fight alone? Or would any act of saving become, in practice, another act of destruction? The heart of the question is not just survival, it is autonomy. Do we as outsiders have the right to decide what's best for a people who have already chosen their own path? For uncontacted tribes, isolation is not ignorance. It is wisdom, born from centuries of experience with the outside world. Their silence is not emptiness, it is resistance. And yet, this leaves us with a haunting paradox. If we do nothing, the forest around them may collapse, taking them with it. But if we reach out, our very touch could become fatal. It is a question without a simple answer, one that forces us to look inward as much as outward. Do we value their lives enough to protect them, even if that means never meeting them? Can a modern world, built on discovery and expansion, truly respect the most radical demand of all, the right to remain unseen? Perhaps the answer does not lie in choosing for them, but in learning how to guard the boundaries they have already drawn. Chapter 7. Guardians of Isolation. Imagine for a moment that the Amazon is not just a rainforest, but a fortress, and its most precious treasures are not gold or oil, but the last truly uncontacted peoples on Earth. If you step back and look at it this way, then who guards them? Who makes sure that these tribes, hidden deep in the jungle, can continue living their way of life, untouched by the modern world? These guardians are not only the trees, rivers, and jaguars of the Amazon. They are also human activists, governments, and indigenous defenders who fight battles most of us never hear about. Let's start with the forest itself. Nature, in many ways, has always been the first guardian. The Amazon's size and density are overwhelming. Vast, tangled vines, rivers that twist endlessly, thick canopies that shut out the sun. This natural shield makes it nearly impossible for outsiders to stumble across. Uncontacted tribes without significant effort. For centuries, this very isolation kept these groups safe. But as we've already seen in the earlier chapters, modern expansion is breaking down those natural barriers. Now, human guardianship has become essential. One of the most striking examples of this is Brazil's FUNAI, the National Indian Foundation. This government body has been tasked with protecting indigenous peoples, including those who live in voluntary isolation. Their policy, controversial to some but life-saving to others, is known as the no-contact approach. Instead of seeking to bring these tribes into the modern world, FUNA's strategy is to protect their territories, enforce buffer zones, and allow them to remain uncontacted for as long as they choose. Patrols are sent to monitor the edges of these territories, watching for illegal loggers, miners, and drug traffickers. But it's a dangerous mission. Over the years, FUNAI agents and indigenous protectors have been killed while trying to defend these invisible borders. But the guardianship of these tribes is not just in the hands of governments. Indigenous organizations themselves are rising as powerful protectors. Groups like APIB Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil and networks across Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador are now leading the charge. They argue that outsiders should not decide the fate of uncontacted tribes. Instead, indigenous people who understand the forest and its laws of survival better than anyone must be the ones standing guard. In many ways, they are the true guardians of isolation, because they defend not just land, but a way of life that is thousands of years old. International organizations also play a role. Groups like Survival International have campaigned globally to raise awareness about uncontacted tribes, shining a light on illegal invasions and pressuring governments to act. Their campaigns are often the only reason why cases of genocide, massacres, or invasions ever reach the global news. Without their work, many of these isolated peoples would simply vanish, erased by silence. And then there is another kind of guardian, one not often spoken of: the law. In some countries, the constitutions themselves recognize the right of uncontacted tribes to remain uncontacted. In Brazil, for instance, it's Sutsa. The 1988 Constitution guarantees the right of indigenous peoples to their land and traditions. In Peru, certain areas are legally designated as indigenous reserves for peoples in isolation. On paper, these laws are shields, granting protection. But as always, a law is only as strong as the will to enforce it. And too often, greed and politics weaken that shield. But here's a deeper layer. Are these guardians truly protecting isolation, or are they also making a choice for these tribes? Critics argue that by enforcing isolation, governments and NGOs are deciding the destiny of people who cannot voice their wishes in modern courts. But defenders push back. These tribes do express their wishes, simply not in the ways we expect. When they flee from helicopters, fire arrows at invaders, or vanish deeper into the forest at the sound of engines, they are making their choice clear. They want to remain apart. To ignore that would not be inclusion. It would be another form of colonialism. The story of the guardians of isolation is therefore not a simple one. It is a story of constant vigilance, of invisible battles fought in remote jungle frontiers. It is the story of indigenous patrols who risked their lives against armed miners. It is the story of journalists, activists, and lawyers trying to amplify voices that cannot be heard on television or social media. And it is also the story of trees, rivers, and jaguars, nature itself standing as the first and oldest guardians of humanity's last uncontacted tribes. In the end, the question remains, can this guardianship last forever? As global pressure mounts with climate change, resource exploitation, and politics intensifying, will these guardians be strong enough to hold the line? Or will the uncontacted tribes of the Amazon eventually face the same fate as so many others, erased not by choice, but by force? Chapter 8. The Unknown Neighbors. The Amazon is often called the lungs of the earth, but hidden deep within its endless green labyrinth lie people who might as well be ghosts to the modern world. They are not myths. They are not relics of the past. They are our contemporaries living in the year 2025 just as we do. But by choice or by fate, they remain invisible. And yet, every now and then, a sign appears. A whisper of their presence, a flicker of smoke, the glint of a canoe sliding across a moonlit river, or the sudden sting of arrows raining down on a boat that got too close. These are the rare, haunting moments when the unknown neighbors of the Amazon make themselves known. Imagine trekking deep into the forest, far from any modern settlement. At first, all you see is endless green, but then, faintly in the distance, smoke rises in a thin, careful spiral. It's not from a wildfire, and it's not random. It's controlled a fire tended by unseen hands. Anthropologists, missionaries, and loggers alike have stumbled upon these signals for centuries. For those who know how to read them, smoke is a language. It says, "We are here. Stay away." There are stories of hunters or rubber tappers in the early 20th century encountering silent canoes drifting down hidden rivers, simple dugouts, expertly carved from tree trunks, vanishing before they could be approached. And then there are the arrows. Sharp, barbed, and often dipped in poison, they have struck helicopters, pierced the hulls of boats, and even wounded intruders who dared to cross invisible borders. To the tribes, these arrows are more than weapons. They are messages written in wood and stone. The message is clear. We do not want contact. But within this mystery lies extraordinary diversity. Anthropologists believe there may be more than 100 distinct uncontacted groups across the Amazon basin. Each is a world unto itself, a unique language, a unique way of organizing family, rituals, and survival. Imagine dozens of human cultures living only a few hundred miles apart, yet separated not by oceans, but by choice and silence. To outsiders, they might seem the same: bare-chested hunters, painted skin, bows and arrows. But to themselves, the differences are vast. For one tribe, a particular bird might be sacred. For another, it is food. For one, face paint may mark adulthood. For another, it may signal war. These variations remind us that humanity, as creativity and diversity, didn't begin with cities and skyscrapers. It has always existed, even in the most hidden corners of the earth. But here's where the story turns darker. The curiosity of outsiders has too often ignored the rules of distance and respect. In Peru, loggers have penetrated isolated zones in search of mahogany, bringing diseases that have wiped out entire families. In Brazil, missionaries have crossed forbidden lines, believing they are saving souls, only to spark violence or epidemics. In one tragic case in 2018, an American missionary was killed by the Sentinelese, an uncontacted people not in the Amazon, but on an island in the Indian Ocean after he attempted to bring them the Bible. That story, though far from South America, serves as a warning. Ignoring the will of isolated peoples can end in tragedy for both sides. And yet, despite these dangers, curiosity persists. Who are these neighbors? What languages do they speak? What myths do they tell by firelight? What knowledge of plants, animals, and survival do they carry, knowledge that might one day even hold cures for diseases we have yet to conquer? These questions are both fascinating and dangerous, because to seek those answers, outsiders must cross lines that may never be uncrossed. So here lies the paradox. Our unknown neighbors are both fragile and fierce. Fragile in the face of disease, fragile when their land is taken, but fierce in their defense, fierce in their refusal to surrender their way of life. They are both a mystery and a mirror, reminding us of what it means to choose freedom in its rawest form. And now comes the haunting question. But what happens when outsiders ignore the rules? That question takes us deeper into the most dangerous encounters, where the balance between curiosity and survival collapses, and history repeats itself in blood. Chapter 9. Lessons from the Past. When we look at uncontacted tribes today, their fierce resistance to outsiders might seem extreme, but history explains it all, and it's written in tragedy. Across South America, countless indigenous groups once thrived in forests, rivers, and mountains. Yet time and again, when outsiders entered their world, devastation followed, not through wars of equal strength, but through invisible enemies, germs, greed, and guns. Take the story of the Nahua people of Peru. In the 1980s, oil exploration carved into their land. Within months of contact, diseases like the flu and pneumonia, which they had no natural defenses against, swept through their community. More than half of their people died. What outsiders considered minor illnesses became lethal epidemics for the Nahua, or the case of the Panara in Brazil. When the Trans-Amazonian Highway cut through their territory in the 1970s, strangers brought measles and influenza. Their population collapsed by nearly 90%. Survivors were forced off their ancestral land and resettled in distant regions, where their traditions weakened and their identity nearly vanished. It took decades before they regained control of a small part of their homeland. And these are only the recorded stories. Anthropologists warn that for every Panara or Nahua we know, there are other tribes whose names we will never hear because they were wiped out before anyone even realized they existed. Whole cultures, languages, and mythologies lost forever in silence. This brutal history is the reason why governments like Brazil and Peru now enforce the policy of no contact. Instead of seeking integration, officials protect isolated territories by surrounding them with legal boundaries, keeping outsiders away at all costs. The lesson is simple. Contact isn't just risky, it's deadly. For tribes that have survived thousands of years in isolation, a single meeting with the modern world could be the end. But there's something deeper here too. Each destroyed tribe isn't just a local tragedy. It's a loss for all of humanity. Imagine if every time we made contact, another library filled with human knowledge, languages, stories, medicinal plant wisdom, spiritual traditions was set on fire. That is what we lose when isolation is broken. And yet, despite the lessons carved into history, pressure from outsiders continues. Miners, loggers, missionaries, even curious adventurers all test the fragile rules designed to protect these last guardians of isolation. So yes, the past has shaped today's policies, but their very existence still raises a bigger question, one not just for governments, but for all of us. What do these uncontacted tribes teach us about ourselves and the future of humanity? Chapter 10. Why they matter to us in the end. The story of uncontacted tribes isn't just about the Amazon. It's about us, about what it means to be human. These communities remind us that resilience takes many forms. While we measure progress in technology, skyscrapers, and space exploration, they measure it in survival, in passing down traditions, in finding balance with nature, in raising children who know the forest as intimately as we know city streets. Against hunger, disease, and invasion, they endure. And in that endurance lies a kind of strength we often forget to recognize. They also teach us something about diversity. Each tribe carries a unique worldview, languages unlike any others on Earth, songs and myths that exist nowhere else, knowledge of plants that could one day save lives far beyond the forest. Protecting them isn't only about saving their culture, it's about protecting the full spectrum of human possibility. Without them, humanity's story becomes flatter, smaller, less alive. And perhaps most importantly, they remind us that they are not primitive. They are not frozen in time. They are people making choices hard, deliberate choices, to remain independent in a world that has not been kind to them. Choosing isolation isn't weakness. It's sovereignty. It's the clearest declaration of freedom any community can make. So when we talk about protecting uncontacted tribes, We're really talking about protecting one of humanity's last frontiers of diversity and self-determination. Their story matters because it challenges us to ask, can we allow more than one definition of progress to exist? And here's where you come in. If you believe their story should continue, if you believe the world is richer with them in it, then raise awareness. Share their story. Support the organizations working to guard their land. And don't let their voices be silenced. And if you believe their story should continue, here's how you can help. Start by joining us here on this channel. Like, comment, and subscribe to Decoding History and Science, where together we uncover the hidden stories that shape our world.